172 Portree Drive, Dunedin, Florida, phone 813-733-2808, Saturday, February the 18th, 1989, with Helen Earley of the Oldsmobile History Center, Lansing, Mich. Location was Mr. Landis' home in Dunedin. Tape 1 of 1 tape. Okay, Claude, we're on.
We're on. Well, I'm Claude Landis. We live at 172 Portree Drive in Dunedin, Florida.
When did you hire into Olds, Claude?
1934, but I can't remember the date exactly.
That's close enough. Why did you come to Olds instead of some other company?
Well, I moved around a little bit, and I'd lived in Lansing, and then we went to Iowa for a while, and then moved back. And I knew Mr. St. Germain. He was the boss in the material department at Oldsmobile.
Material department.
And I asked him if he could, about getting a job. And he told me to, he talked to Leon, and I can't think of his last name. That was the employment manager at Oldsmobile. So she wanted to clerk in the office. And he thought I could do that. So, yes, the very next day, Leon wanted to see me. So we went down, talked, and
where was the employment office at that time?
Where was the employment office at that time? I believe it was over in building 62, maybe 60, probably.
Okay.
And we finally got it okay. But see, I don't have eyesight in my left eye. And that was one of the things that they were a little skeptical about. And they agreed to hire me, but I'd have to stay out of the plant. I couldn't only work in the office, but I couldn't get out in the plant. And I started in writing the receiving slips for Storage 1 up in the front end of Building 34. That was in 1934. And
now, was this receiving on all of the material that came in, or just certain types of material?
The material that comes in for the exit plant.
For the
all the exit plant stuff was good. And we wrote them out by hand and turned them in each day as whatever material comes in.
Now, was that on a carbonized form?
No.
You just made
the receiving slip.
The original.
And what they done with the main office, I don't know, about getting a duplicate of anything. But it don't seem to me as we have duplicates out there in the office.
Okay.
And well, I guess it just worked on, and I got a little nosy about getting out. And I worked out in the shop a little bit.
Okay, what'd you do in the shop?
Counting material or checking material that had been received, and whatever Lou wanted done. If they run short of material, why then to report it so that they'd know they had to have material in by certain time. That was in Building 34. I think we worked in there about 4 or 5 years.
Who was your superintendent or your foreman?
Well, Frank Metz was the superintendent, and Lou St. Germain was my boss. And we got along real well. We got very familiar with the area and the material that we were receiving, and
You were still under material
control.
control.
And learning the part numbers and just be able to tell the boys what the part number was of a certain item that they were short.
So more like a crib area you were working in?
No, not a crib, because we didn't have the parts in there. We just
I
kept the records.
see, they kept maintaining
What
the
we know we
records.
had received and so forth.
Okay,
And when we was gonna run out of material, maybe, we had the count, so we know pretty much how many the line was on. But this is the axle plant, and we build all the front and rear axles there.
did you build axles for any other car division?
No,
Just Oldsmobile?
just those. And then they put them on a trailer and haul them up and put them on the assembly line.
And what building was the assembly line in then?
Well, the one that runs along there, what is it? Along the railroad back there. The big building there.
Well, we can pick that up.
Yeah. And, could have been 30.
I knew there's a road back on 32, that's why.
My wife, she worked in the cafeteria there
Oh,
Helped him out, there's some, not a lot.
part-time.
hmm.
Then we went into war material. And we had the 90-millimeter gun that they made right there in, what's the building? Right there on just a little bit,
Building 33?
could have been. And, then we made,
And you still maintain the similar type records on the guns?
that's right, the records,
Parts.
just, the parts and what we had and what was so forth.
Was there a different feeling in the plant when we began into gun work? Where people, did you sense of patriotism, or
No, I don't think so. We,
it was just another job?
just another job, and we worked, days. But they had a night shift on that thing too.
Oh.
And then they went into, airplane parts. The blades and for the jet engine.
What year was that?
One was,
Oh, 42 to 45.
let's see, I've been in there 10 years.
Well, Claude, let me go back to when you first hired in. What did you hire in at? What was your
A clerk,
clerk, but what was your pay?
52 cents an hour.
52 cents an hour. Okay. Then you got up during the war. Did you earn more money? Do you recall?
Can't remember. I would just be guessing. If I-
Sure.
Yeah.
Were you paid overtime?
I was always paid overtime.
Did you work more hours during the war?
Yeah. We got a little more money. Well, we had a little more money before that. As time went on,
Then you got into the airplane parts.
we got into airplane parts,
And that was right at the end of, or toward the end of World War II?
and then they moved the airplane parts manufacturing over to the Saginaw Seat plant,
Plant 3?
plant 3. And I moved over there and I had an office there. And,
Who worked with you in the office then?
Betty Goucher is one.
I'm going to
You're gonna see her.
see her too.
And, well, there's some of the other foremen that were in there. I think they're down there too. But,
Who were those foremen that you worked with, that you can recall?
well, we had Charlie Armitage was, one of the guys.
See the superintendent or the foreman?
That's the letters here.
That's a letter.
Here, here's the, what Paul is looking at,
Here's,
Your one, huh?
is it?
here. Barry Paul, I knew him. He worked in the I can't remember whether they worked with us or whether they were supervisors of the assembly line, which we serviced with parts.
These were airplane parts.
The blades,
The blades.
was a big deal. And there's manufacturing and all the way through the system, bladed and everything. But then I think by that time I was probably supervisor because they had moved you over there and we had an office right on the dock and well, let's see. And we started in, it was our job to take care of all the salvage materials, turnings from the blades machinery and keeping it separate and so forth. And I got into that pretty good and knew a little bit about it.
How did we handle that salvage? The disposal of it?
We sold it.
You know, who would you
I don't think they run a bid out, and I don't think we was into it at that time. But the different kind of turnings, they all had to be kept separate. And the sheet metal, they had some sheet metal in there too. And that would be the trimmings on the metal that would be good for nothing other than scrap.
So each type of so-called salvage had to be kept separate.
Oh, yes.
Then on now what's the term I'm searching for? The material that you could actually use again. You sent out bids. You sent out ask for
Now
bids
you're
on
talking about the salvage material that
it.
we
Yeah, that
sold.
could be salvaged.
Yeah, we send them out.
That was on a bid system.
Bid basis.
Mhm.
And
Ooh, do you remember anybody that you would send bids to?
um,
Okay, that's all right.
well, of course, now all of your scrap dealers there in town, yeah. Friedland and
Oh, first local people, then
local.
did you reach outside of
Oh, yeah.
Lansing?
Yeah, we shipped them all over.
I
And
see.
even now like the borings from the different jobs here were sent out, and we sold them to Defiance, really. But we'd sell enough of them to get a price on them, and then we'd sell them into that. Defiance was the location, and they would use them in their plant. See, that was the idea. Any material that could be used in our plant after it was go through the scrap field, then it was we'd sell it.
Well, how did we dispose of the old machinery that,
That come a little later. And I don't know. I don't know when I was put on that job, but I took part of salvage. I was put the supervisor of salvage.
do you remember what time that was?
It was
Okay,
close to 1950.
okay.
And
Close to it here. I don't know, 49 or.
Good, fine.
then along with this scrapping one thing, well, when I moved into the salvage department, I moved back over to the main plant. And I had an office downstairs and all the old building. It's
Bill
28.
28? Is that the
I
one?
think so.
Okay,
And we sorted out the different ferrous scrap,
now what is that?
well, brass and aluminum and copper and so forth. And we had men that's all they did, was sort that. And that we sell so much copper, so much. When we had it on enough of it to make a bid, see. And that run along. Well, we did it for a long time. even the material that come out from the other plants, they send over and we sort it and sell it, so much of this and so much of that, on a bid basis.
So you also handle all of the scrap, so-called steel and
If
Anything
anything was
of the
scrap,
scrap.
we had it. And then we had a store that we had a man work in, and we'd sell items that people could use out of that store for the price, whatever it was.
like sell to employees?
Yeah.
Now, was there any problem there in selling items to employees?
No, not really.
Now, what,
But I know.
what kind of items would you have down there that you would sell to?
Oh, nuts and bolts and bits. Canceled out, weren't gonna use them anymore. Maybe they weren't good enough to do the job, or 100 different reasons.
Well, did you have other items? I mean, would there be car radios or?
Car radios and mufflers and materials.
And the seat covers.
So
Whatever we had that wasn't gonna be used in Oldsmobiles, that's send to the Salvage Department, we dispose of it. So,
I see. How did you, assign a value to that so that the employee knew how much to pay? Was there some
well, of course,
form?
we had the bids go out on this salvage material, if we was gonna sell it on the open market. And, some things, I suppose, that, we had to kind of guess at as far as value is concerned. But, we had a lot of stuff that, different things.
Well, did you have, scrap upholstery from Fisher Body? Was that coming
Yeah.
over?
Anything that was scrap that belonged to Oldsmobile would come in there, we could use.
I see.
And then the cancellation of parts, Oldsmobile would cancel them out for some reason, maybe that, at the end of the run, they'd have material that they had canceled because they aren't gonna build as many cars as they had planned on originally when the purchasing department ordered this stuff. So,
Okay.
and, this I got into pretty deep because, when they first put me in charge of the salvage department, I mean, in the supervisory capacity.
It's made general foreman.
Is that your position, General Foreman?
Oh, yeah, I worked right, foreman, general foreman, up to superintendent, and, the material that, was canceled out by Oldsmobile. That was out in the plant, some other plants, certain quantity of it. And, when they put me in charge of the salvage in this capacity, they sent a slip out in the office that purchasing department had. And, I was supposed to sign it.
Now, what kind of a slip? What did it mean?
Well, that they had so much stuff off certain plant. And, the charge was there, the quantity that was there and everything else. And, we were supposed to okay paying that. That's my job. But, when that first started, they had a slip come out and it was AC spark plug. And it was a big one.
Would that be spark plugs that were an overage on spark plugs?
I don't remember just exactly, but it would be parts of a spark plug.
Parts of a spark.
It would be
Okay.
where it was in process of being manufactured, it was left over, then it was, there's where you stopped, and then you charged it out to Oldsmobile. see?
Okay.
And, I told the boss, I said, I was working for Dick Brown at that time. And from then on out, I told him, if I'm gonna sign it, I think we ought to check it. Well, he says, maybe so, and they thought, get an auditor and do that. So on this particular one, why, and we done it for several of them afterwards. But on this particular one, Virgil Smith in the auditing department now took off for Flint. And we checked this stuff out. And they didn't have what they said at all. And when we got back that night, I called the boss and told him, I said, well, we paid for our trip. It was about $100,000.
Was somebody made an error in computing it, or?
If they did, no, no error. They just didn't have it, but they'd done this so long, it's hard to tell. So, from then on, all cancellation claims with any amount of money, Virgil and I would go off and check the country, whether it was in Ohio or wherever it was, see. And, this is pretty much true all the way around. They, until they knew that we were checking them, they'd add a little bit to it. So from then on, I didn't keep track of it anymore. But we did that for what, 5 years?
Quite a while.
Yeah. And Phoebe, she knows because she used to go with Virgil and I if we had to stay overnight. And I had to pay her way, but she used to be coming.
Well, I just was home, you know, I might as well go as long as I could.
Of course.
And well, we had a salvage department in the main plant.
Now, what building?
Well, this was in the basement there.
Building.
28. I believe it was 28. And then we had one in the jet plant, one in the forge plant, and all this stuff, not all of it, but most of it would be shipped in there, and then we send the bids out to the different people that bought scrap material.
Was most of this some types of metal?
Yeah.
Or and then you had parts too?
Well, metal, and there could be fabrics for cars and anything another like that.
At one time, we were at the jet plant and did the bumpers and
Well, that was part of when we was over at the jet plant. We had the blades for the jet engine, airplane engine, and the bumper plant. They moved over there, and we had charge of that and all the scrap from that.
Now, what kind of scrap would come from the bumpers?
Well, your bumper stock would come in and flat stuff. So when they put it in to form it, your edges would come off, and we sell that scrap to the bidders.
Now, what local bidder would bid on that, like Friedland?
Friedland got into some of it, but they didn't have any way of handling it when they got it unless they resold it.
I
Because they
see.
didn't have any machines or any furnaces to mill it down and make it into something else. See. But we had places to send it.
You never had any problem getting rid of scrap.
we made a good salvage.
Still
Every
in.
time you see junk, kids say, "Oh, they're junk."
And they had this, the 3 plants I was telling you about, and for me to get around to the different plants, I drove alone for a while, and they gave me a ticket so I could pull in and park by the office. And Then they give me a car.
Well, now these scrap yards, the scrap must have been in some yard in some areas, or where did they maintain these huge piles?
Well, no, over at Plant 3, we had pits where all the scrap was put into.
Now, what do you mean by pits? Claude?
None in the ground.
They were
Open on
inside,
top.
open on
With
top?
the cover over this, the one at Plant 3 was that way.
It was
And-
just a hole dug in the ground? Didn't have any cement around?
We had, we must have had 10, pits.
These were just, oh,
Down
well, no,
20 feet deep.
oh, with nothing to keep the earth from falling in, or were they
They
cemented?
were all
or-
cemented in.
I
They
see.
they were made that way. And then we had an overhead crane that could go to each one of the pits, whatever he was working on to load. And the railroad tracked them down in the middle
I
so
see.
that he could load the scrap. And he knew what scrap he was handling.
Pits were about 20 feet deep, you're saying?
Yeah, they were way
You
down.
had what, 10, 12 of them?
There must have been,
Plant 3?
there must have been, 16, 18, 20.
So how many tons of scrap would you say a year? Would you have an idea that was salvaged?
There's a lot of it. You take the borings that come out of the gun job and even off of all the machining was put in different pits, different kinds of metal.
Segregated?
And when we get a pit load, why we sell a carload, see?
How much would a carload weigh?
Not very much different. You couldn't tell how much carload, well, you
Depend-
take turnings and we couldn't get the limit. I don't know what it was anymore, but you couldn't pile that much stuff in. Then you get some that's laid pretty heavy. And
I see. Depends on the type of metal and the type of shape.
yeah, just like now, you take the borings from the different jobs and they're small and they lay close together, so you could get a pretty good load on. And some of the cheap metal stuff that was partly formed, and you couldn't get enough in to make a load limit, but you had to get them out of there.
What was the load limit?
So
Okay,
I think each car is marked with what it carry, you know.
sure.
Well, let's see. Yeah, you're talking about what we sold and so forth. We started in selling the machinery that Oldsmobile didn't use anymore.
Yes, how did we get rid of that?
Well, each machine is numbered. And I don't know how often, I guess whenever we got enough of them, the department would send out to us a list and the numbers of the machines that they wanted to get rid of. And they'd be scattered all through the Oldsmobile. And they'd tell what section they were in and tell us to get rid of it.
Did they give you a time limit on when you had to get rid of it?
Well, they had a time limit on them, and they would be available to ship out at a certain time and so forth.
So was Mr. Patterson, machinery business.
Yeah, a little bit on machinery, but his was kind of specialized stuff. He wouldn't buy everything. He didn't buy so much scrap as he did stuff that he could
You could use that.
sell for something else. We had these guys, oh, good gracious, I don't know how many there was of them. But we'd make up a list of all the stuff we was gonna sell, the numbers of the machinery, what the machine was, what kind of a machine, what it was
Supposed to do?
supposed to do, and send it out to these scrap dealers. They're scrap machinery dealers, see.
Now, those would be all over the United States?
It could be
It
anywhere.
could be anywhere, I
Mhm.
see.
And this is what I was telling you there at first. This old shear the Oldsmobile bought first machine, and they marked it #1. Came over to sell, so we sent it out.
Or what would that machine do?
Well, it would cut up any metal.
Cut any metal?
Yeah, if you wanted to cut it up in pieces, or if you wanted to cut it to a certain size, or when I suppose in #1, they'd taken up their fenders, they had it cut, I don't know.
And the
But-
name was O'Shear? That was the brand name?
The shears,
Oh, the,
that's the kind of a machine it is.
oh, shears?
Just a shear.
Just a shear,
Yeah.
I see, okay.
You know, #1 come up, and we sold it there.
Now, was that the first machine of that type that had been gotten into the Olds?
No,
Oh,
that was the first machine that Oldsmobile bought.
that's what I was trying to track down.
And,
And they bought that to do what? I mean, and do you remember the year they bought it and why they bought it?
I couldn't tell you the year.
Let's see.
They bought it to use to start making cars. A lot of these machines that could be used for other things, and that's what these machine dealers would buy, like a press. We sold some of the big presses in there that would, 20 feet up in the air.
We're in business
We're
here.
in business again. Huh?
Yep.
Well, like I was saying, these machines that the other buyers could use, or have a customer for, want to sell to. See,
How heavy would those machines be? How much?
tons of it.
Just tons?
Some of these big presses out of sheet metal, I wouldn't know how heavy they are, but
You
they're
said
great.
one machine was at least 20 feet
Yeah.
high.
And like the fender presses. And put the piece of metal in there, push the button down, come up all the dies to form that fender, see? And they have to be heavy and well built to stand that kind of stuff. But we'd sell them, they'd get them out of there. They'd have to hire machine movers to come in and move them out.
How would you move a 20-foot machine that weighed tons?
It takes a machine mover, I'll tell you.
But how do they have to partly dismantle a machine?
Well, sometimes, and they have to get them, you take those big presses, there's quite a bit of sheen underneath the surface, down in the floor, see? Then the floor would have to be repaired or filled up and made it for the next machine they set there. Well,
Now, Claude, when you sent out this list of salvage machinery to these possible purchasers, so were you able always to get rid of all the machines that you didn't need any longer? Was there a time when you couldn't get rid of a certain machine?
if there was, we just put it in scrap, the scrap machinery. Put it on the scraps pile, see?
Oh, so you had another pile besides the little bits
Oh,
and
yeah.
pieces of scrap, you had a scrap machinery
If-
area too?
Every time we had a sale on scrap machinery, I'm sure that we had stuff that nobody wanted, and then it would just turn down as scrap.
Yeah, and then what happened to that big machine if nobody wanted it?
These scrap dealers that send into the mills and mill it down for other kind of stuff.
Oh, so then it would sort of be dismantled and put on a boxcar and shipped to a scrap iron dealer who would, to a mill that could melt it down, I see.
That's right.
Well, now, let me ask you, when you sold a machine that you no longer want, then this salvage dealer comes in, does he pay to get the machine out of the plant? Or does Oldsmobile's employees take the machine out and here it is, it's ready for you to the purchaser? Who pays for getting the machine out of there? Mechanics.
That's a good question, but, as is where is, I think,
Pardon me?
as is where is.
Oh, so, but if it's all fastened down and part of it's in the, underneath the cement floor, there must be some cost involved in, extricating it and getting it to a railroad car. That's what I was wondering. Who pays for that?
The employees did it, didn't they? So then the company would pay for it.
Oh.
I was just wondering if that
Some of
was,
that stuff, you'd have to have a regular machine mover to move.
yes, if
It's that
the
big.
buyer, if that wasn't part of the, price that the buyer bid into to
I
get the
think
machine
probably
out.
Oldsmobile get this thing loaded on his equipment or
I
whatever
see.
you see.
Okay, very fine.
A lot of these machines, Oldsmobile, we sold them for more money than Oldsmobile paid for them at the time when they bought them, so the money could, you know how it was. But,
So there really, in some cases, wasn't a loss, was there?
sure. And, I think that's, pretty well covered it. Got cancer up in.
He's got some cancers all over his head. Oh, he's having that.
Oh, dear.
Uh,
Well, Claude, let me ask you.
Yeah.
Now, about the upholstery material that used to come over from Fisher Body. Seems like we just had bolts and bolts of that for a while, and then all of a sudden that didn't happen anymore. Why did we used to have so much available and then it seemed to peter out?
Well, maybe they had a little better control on buying for the jobs that they really built.
I see.
If they canceled quite a few jobs, then you would have material left over and you change material, so it's no good the next year, see? But,
Okay.
if they had a little better control on what they bought and built the cars that they had intended to build when they made it, put the orders in for it, well, then there wouldn't be that much left over, see? But, we did have a lot of material that we sold from the salvage department to this one department that, was material that came in that was left over from the cancellation claims, see? We had, I could tell them what to do with the material in those plants. What to do with it, whether to send it back to the plant or whether to scrap it out there or what, see? And,
Now to scrap it out there, what does that mean?
well, it wasn't bringing in some stuff you couldn't use in it now that nobody else would want. And we'd have to get a pretty good price for the employees to pay for bringing it in. So we just say scrap it out.
What, that would then go into the normal junk that would go out of that plant?
Probably.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
how was that handled? I mean, what is normal junk that goes out of a plant, and what do they do with it? Where do they take it? How do they dispose of it?
I really can't answer that anymore. I know at the time, but it slipped my mind.
Did Fisher Body have to dispose of their own if you didn't want
If we had much trouble there, we'd really send it in and then we could check it better. And, know that we wasn't being shipped anyway.
What other items were available through salvage? Now, you mentioned the upholstery and spark plugs, I think you mentioned, car radios perhaps. What other items? Were there floor mats,
Mufflers,
seat color?
Tailpipes, you name it.
It was,
We had a lot of stuff out of that salvage department. They took in a lot of money.
how many people worked in the salvage department when you were superintendent?
Well, Joe Zielinski was our man in the salvage department, and if he needed help, we'd shove him in. The rest of the people that we had working for us, sorting material or running a crane or whatever they were doing out in the yard, we could, what we have about 20 people, I think. And we could ship people around to the jobs that we had to get done. And
Was that difficult to control the inventory system so you knew what you had, or?
no, not really.
But this was kind of all handwork because you didn't have a computer then, did you?
Oh, we-
We
I
had
know.
2 girls that worked for it.
Yes, and you had Betty Goucher, and who was the other
No,
one?
Betty didn't work
Oh,
for it
she-
this time.
I see. Who were the 2 girls that worked for you?
Esterline,
Diane, oh, I don't know her last name.
Dana Esterline. Then she got married, and what her name was now.
Mhm.
And, she, what the old girl's name?
Well, when Betty Goucher worked for you, what was your title then?
General foreman.
And you were in,
Foreman, the general foreman. She was, and then superintendent, she was right with me for a long time.
and this was still the salvage area.
Still south.
And you reported to Vic Brown?
Yeah.
Okay, and
I
his,
think, right up, well,
So then when you went in to be a superintendent, I mean,
then I went to, then I worked for, well, still under Vic Brown, but,
yeah, and then Betty stayed with Vic.
who was the
That
other
was
man
right.
in there that you mentioned?
What was the guy that?
But died of a heart
Bert,
attack.
Bert, was it Bert? Y'all think that-
That's okay. Who, was general manager most of the time when you were working?
Well,
Wolfram?
yeah, he was there.
Skinner?
Yeah, he was there.
Netzel?
Smith, was Smith,
No,
the one that lived down at the Blue River.
no, he wasn't general manager.
who was the first one in there, 1934? Who managed
McEwen.
that, the killing?
And I think there was Skinner and then Wolfram. And then we had,
Wolfram,
he was there from 40 to 50.
see, I retired in 68.
68.
68,
How many years were you there, Claude?
34,
30?
35.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Good record. Do you mind telling me what you were earning when you left to give us kind of a balance of salary
Well,
brackets? And if you don't,
I don't bother. We were getting up around $1,000
a month.
and, then we got into the bonus thing a little bit. Each year there, toward the last. Oldsmobile was good to me.
Good place to work, isn't it?
And, I think they treated people just as good as anybody could.
Well, what working conditions in the plant? How would you say those were when you were working?
Well, they didn't put much pressure on me. I didn't try to bother them any. Tried to run my own place. And, Vic never had much to criticize me about.
What kind of a man was he to work with?
Very nice fellow. Vic. And of course, Frank Metz was a good man. He was the superintendent of that department.
Now, Salvage reported to the manufacturing manager or the production manager.
Production manager, and I can't think of the guy's name who's running that Randall was in there,
Oh, Bud Brandel.
but Randall. The first time I ever got a bonus. Bud says, no, don't ever sell that.
That was GM stock, your bonus.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Uh,
Good advice.
Keep it.
What kind of a man was Bud Brandel?
Well, a
work
lot of
with.
people thought he was a little bit tough, but I never had any trouble with Bud. So,
Do you remember any kind of funny or interesting incidents about, when you were working in salvage?
yeah, I sold some garbage, the dumpsters. We had a bunch of them they wanted us to get rid of, so we
Oh,
sold
you mean the actual,
dumpsters that they
the
put
truck-
stuff in around, junk
Yeah.
around the plant.
they,
I don't remember how many there was, but they was gonna change over and get a different kind of a setup. And, I sold those. It was supposed to be available at a certain time, but they changed their mind, see?
the buyer changed his mind?
No, I think, no,
Oh, the Olds changed their mind on getting rid of
I'm
them?
getting rid of them. They
Nice.
still needed them. They
Oh.
couldn't get rid of them. And they hadn't got rid of them yet when I left there. But I think afterwards, the guy sued us for them. And, I don't know how it ever come out.
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah, of course, he has a sale for him, see?
Mhm.
And, it was all about that. We could sell them and we were gonna deliver them a certain time. But, things changed and this could happen, you see.
Sure.
And, it was kind of comical because we've done the best we could to try to keep him happy, but he eventually, I'm sure he eventually sued him.
Well, he probably had a legitimate claim there if he
Oh, I
had
suppose.
bargained in good faith.
I don't remember whether, I'm sure he didn't pay for him because, if he had him, we'd have returned his money. But, oh, that's just one little item. We had, one job over in plant 3 where we was loading the scrap. And you just couldn't get it loaded. The magnet wouldn't pick it up because it hung together, so. And we finally got a hay fork. I said, let's give us a hay fork and see if we can load it. And that's what we did. Got a hay fork and shove it down into it, and then we pulled the levers on it and pick up a little bunch of it. And stuff like that.
Well, see, that's interesting because most people don't realize how scrap in a large manufacturing concern is handled at all.
They don't think they have any. A lot of people don't think that they have.
True.
But it was a big business. And the machinery
Oh,
was
and the
another
junk
big
man.
business. And you had a lot of machines that, actually were only good for about one thing. And if you didn't do that thing, you couldn't use the things.
Well, like what type of machine would that be, and what would the item be that looks good for only?
Well, you take the big presses. If you didn't have a job, like making a fender, for example, it wasn't good for much else. You had to have a pretty big job to put in that thing to make parts or whatever. See,
But you say some of these machines were adaptable to 2 or 3 different operations.
Yeah. Well, you take this shear that they had all that time till we sold it. It's just as good for the shear that they make one today. Of course, it was old. It was probably a little outdated and so forth, but still the things just cut machinery or cut metal.
Well, did those shears have to ever be sharpened like an ordinary shears?
Oh, I suppose. Not to my knowledge. I never heard of one of them sharpened.
Mm-hmm.
One time, didn't you have tires? Weren't you over the tires?
Yeah.
And so you would sell tires through salvage
We
too?
had some tires that we sold through salvage.
Mhm.
But, tires, of course, employees could use. If we could get, maybe that's how we handle it.
I mean, an employee couldn't go in and say, I need 4 Uniroyal tires, size blah, blah.
If we had it, who
Oh,
was selling them, yeah, they could buy them, but not, no, they couldn't say.
they couldn't say what, they had to take what you were offering.
They had to take what we were giving. Or you-
See, how did you handle, did you have scrap tires? How did you handle that? That you couldn't sell anybody? Was the rubber must have been kept separate from other scrap?
I think we'd have a sale. I think we could sell tires if there was something around it that had no use at Oldsmobile. I think we could sell it to employees in any amount that we'd have.
Well, Claude, you had retired before that scrap utilization program at Oldsmobile came in, or were you there when that was in effect?
Scrap utilization?
Program, they had one going at one time over at Plant 2. Was that before your time, or did that come in after you left in 68? That may have come in later, I think it did. Where they utilized in some manner some of the scrap.
Well, I don't remember that.
Well, then perhaps it came in after you left, I think it did. Well, do you remember any work stoppages or problems in the plant? Or
Not like not like they did right after the union got in there and we were gonna strike for certain things. I don't think we ever had any stoppage as far as going ahead and building automobiles.
Mhm. You worked with a lot of personalities. I'm gonna see him.
And then, when they had that fire in Detroit, they pulled him out of there and stayed in Detroit to help set up the plant.
Oh, and the Detroit transmission fire. Tell us about that.
That's what, 1956.
Somewhere in there, I don't remember the dates, but
They asked me if I'd go down there. I said, sure. So
What was your job down there?
we were setting up the material handling in the for the Detroit transmission plant. Different hoppers that we used to putting stuff up the machine for the people to work out to make a part. Did that, and the hoppers were belonged to the Detroit transmission plant. They had to be made. And getting that set up through, getting the people to do little things that we at Oldsmobile had proven to be the thing to do.
What types of things were
We had
those?
handling the material. The type of, well, say hoppers, for example, where they'd set up to make a container that would hold material that they could set up to a machine and work out of. And to take a pilot with a rotary in it that would dump the material into the top of it and it takes it out.
Now, what kind of material? Would those be small parts, apparently?
Nuts and bolts. Then you could go up into sheet metal parts or whatever the thing was. And I don't know how long I was down there. They gave me a car to drive while I was down there.
Now, you drove back and forth each day?
No.
Oh, you stayed down there.
For a week.
just come back at the end of the week.
Mm-hmm.
One time she decided to come down to see me and I decided to come home and We
Never the twain shall meet.
remember that.
Ah. Well, then you also had the Oldsmobile people working with you, or were you the supervisor of Detroit transmission people?
We were just suggesting to the Detroit transmission. I wasn't telling anybody what to do. I was down there to help them get what I knew about things to set up to operate their plants.
You had good cooperation there.
Oh, yeah. They had their meetings and we'd go to meetings and suggest. And they had people that supervised the jobs and so forth that we work with. And they'd ask questions and we'd try to help. And we'd suggest to them too, see.
How long
They
did,
went to Kansas, was it Kansas where the flood was?
Yeah,
When they
Kansas
had
City.
that bad flood.
oh, tell us about that.
Yeah, Kansas City, Missouri had a
Remember
big
that?
flood. And I don't remember what date it was,
I don't either.
but we were married, so it must have been, what, 5 years? But when I got down there, the plant had water 9 foot high in it. You can see right on the walls where the water had been. See, and they had cars in there, and it was in this 9 foot.
Now, this area
Water.
that had been underwater was, was it warehouse? Or was it,
Assembly line, the whole thing.
oh, so these were completed cars, partially completed
Partially.
cars that had been flooded?
The only thing that we could use practically, except for junk, was the tops in the cars because they didn't get wet. The
Oh,
material
like
I'm
the
talking about.
headlining.
Headline. And they get in there and cut that out and use that for rags to clean up parts throughout the plant. It was a mess. It was a mess.
How do you salvage anything like that?
Well, a lot of us just jump it out, scrap it out, and sell your scrap. Yeah,
How long did it take you to get that plant back in operation?
probably a month or so, wasn't it?
I think he was gone. A month or so.
Well, Claude, now you would go into this area that had the 9 foot water in it. Would you try to save any of the cars and send them like to an educational institution for a training
They wouldn't.
item?
They might save some parts off of it, but I can't remember that because I didn't have anything to do with getting rid of this stuff. I was in there just to help get parts and get them lined up.
I see.
Some of the parts could be washed and reused. And
Well, that would be kind of a costly job to have to take them off the vehicles, wouldn't it? Or can
yeah,
you,
but we're talking about parts now
that had not ever
had
been
not
assembled?
used at all. So
I see, new
maybe
parts.
some bolts that would run them through the washer and dry them and use them. But it was a mess. That's been several years ago.
Well, Claude, let me ask you now. What about I know Olds uses a lot of chemicals and oils and quenching oils and that type of thing. Did part of your salvage operations, were you ever into an overage on those types of items?
I can't remember. That would be pretty much usable in any.
Because we did have a recycling program.
Yeah.
I see.
And then other companies would have use for some of that stuff, so you could get rid of it.
But did that type of thing come through your salvage department?
Excuse me. And they was telling him.
Chili?
Are you warm enough?
Yes, thank you.
I don't read.
Perhaps
Not
not.
able to put my finger on anything.
Perhaps not. Do you
Yeah.
remember any incidents in the plant, old fires or anything unusual that happened when you were in the plant?
There's probably some things that in there that happened while I was there, but I don't recall them now.
Well, did you go out to other assembly plants, more other than like the Kansas City one, to help with installations or suggestions on machinery?
I don't know about all of the other plants. There's a lot of plants on this cancellation thing.
Those were the
All
only
over.
two that you went to help set it up.
So,
Just,
Detroit.
Kansas City.
and-
Well,
and Detroit.
what would you do? Go to the plants after a cancellation of a certain part, or were
We
there?
went to the plant, Virgin, I would, and tell them we were there to check the material that they sent the invoice for and have a copy of it back.
That type of
And
check, I see.
we stay there and see that it was counted and counted right.
Did you have physical help to do that, or manpower to
They
do it?
furnished the help always to do that kind of a thing.
Mhm.
But we were right there to check, which was very good about that.
That third case.
Very good Jim, good guy,
He knew what he was doing.
good with figure.
So in '68, had you been thinking about retiring?
Yeah, a little bit.
Mhm.
I was kind of waiting to retire.
Did you go out on some new program that GM had, or just make a decision that tomorrow I'm going to do it?
You mean on retiring?
Yes.
No, first they knew we was gonna retire, because I told them we was gonna retire. And we had gone down to Benton Harbor, they made the baby on trailer down there. And my son's wife, father, was an auditor. And he had been working in this plant, so we heard about it, so we went down and looked at them, and we ordered this trailer, travel trailer. A picture of it here, good to see it.
Mhm.
And the day we retired, we took our car and went over to Flint and picked up the trailer. And he